Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Precision Rifle Media. This week we're going to have Fred Zeglin on to talk. It's funny, I say Fred Zeglin, I've said Zeglin because I've only ever read it, right? So if you are into any of the gunsmithing books, literally writing the books on gunsmithing and chambering rifles, accurate rifles, and all that. So I think it's going to be really interesting. He also owns or did own 4D Reamer Rentals. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I think his son's really taking it over. But it's somebody that I've done business with here and there, renting Reamers, and I've read some of his books, a couple of his books anyway. I'm really interested in hearing more. He's doing some pretty interesting stuff that we'll get into a little bit later with the book stuff. But with that, I think we'll let Fred introduce himself a little bit here. Fred, I'm really glad to have you on. Can you introduce yourself a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and what you're doing?
Sure. I mean, your pardon me, your intro is very kind, but I'm sure a lot of people don't know who I am. I started out in general gunsmithing. I went to gunsmithing school, graduated in '84 from Lassen College. So I was there when Bob Dunlap was the lead instructor, and so he was my mentor. And went into general gunsmithing for a number of years, and just repaired guns at several different shops that I worked at. I started out in North Idaho and went to San Diego for several years. And ultimately moved to Wyoming, which is where my family's from. And when we got back there, I opened a shop and started doing just custom rifle work pretty much. And that's when Z-Hat Custom became the business name. And so we, for a good 10, 15 years, I built custom rifles under that name and had a line of cartridges called Hawk cartridges, which are just a group of wildcats that there's a little bit of history to, but I put those together. And the idea was to have enough different calibers so that it would suit whether you're a varmint hunter or big game hunter or whatever, that there would be a cartridge in there that would work for you. And then in about 2009, I was offered a chance to move to Montana and run a barrel company. And so I did that. And that lasted about 18 months until the owner and I decided we didn't agree on everything, and we went our separate ways. During that whole time, I owned 4D Reamer Rentals starting in about 2005. And that company basically rents gunsmithing tools, anything small enough to mail. So chamber reamers and headspace gauges and some various tools. We ship that stuff all over the country and people use it and return it, assuming they follow the rules. There's always the guy that doesn't like that,
Yeah. Getting them back late. I know I owe a late fee currently.
Well, that's between you and Dwayne. So,
yeah.
But so that's basically what I did for the last 10, 11 years is run that business and write books. I did help start the gun program here at our local college. It's called the Firearms Technology Program. And the basis of this program is a little different in that we use gunsmithing to teach guys the stuff they want to learn so that they can be in the gun trade. There are a lot of companies up here, either barrel makers or barrel manufacturers of one kind or another.
There's a lot of action companies.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys got a lot of it up there. Motorcycles and gun parts.
Yep, I would agree. And so anyway, I helped get that program started. I've since passed that off to some other guys, and they are just doing great with it. They've got to the point where they have a waiting line to get into the program now, and they have improved the offerings as far as what the classes are, and they've added equipment and abilities, and so they're trying to teach every facet of manufacturing firearms and gunsmithing both. So. And then, naturally, at least for me, it's natural. My interest is in sharing the knowledge I spent a whole life gathering. So that's how I got started writing the books.
Sure. That's awesome. So the college there, is it like gunsmithing school or is it more industry based?
So it's a community college. It's called Flathead Valley Community College. So they have all the normal offerings, and then they have a pretty extensive occupational trades section, which is where the gun program is.
Okay.
They teach welding. They have a fabrication program for guys who want to learn, how to build stuff out of steel. And then they have a great CNC shop, which, the future of the gun business is all CNC. So it's one of the unique places in that you can learn CNC and gun stuff in the same place at the same time. So,
oh, sure. That's interesting. That's is something that's a little overlooked, I think. It's some of the,
well, and it's an expensive program to set up. We lucked out in the time that I was there helping set stuff up. They got some huge grants from the federal government to set up their CNC program. So they have fifth axis machines, and they've got screw machines and CNC lathes. And I mean, basically, if you want to learn CNC, they have the equipment.
Sure. I might have to talk to you about getting somebody from there on to come talk about the program.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I know they'd be glad to do it.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. So let's get back to Reamer Rentals here.
Yes, sir.
And kind of just
what's the program like, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Give us the rundown on it. Renting tools, renting whatever, kind of how it started, and I think a lot of the stuff you've kind of designed or developed too. I mean, the some of the tooling and stuff, right?
There's a few things that we manufacture. There's things I've bought and modified because they're better for rental by being modified. But so the way we got the business was in about 2004, 2005, a guy named Kenny Dickerson owned 4D Reamer Rentals, and I'd been renting from him for a long time. And basically, at one point, jokingly, I said, "Hey, do you want to sell your business?" And he came back and said, "Well, yeah, I probably would." And so it was a natural outgrowth. I mean, I was doing custom guns, so here I have all this experience and knowledge working with reamers and gauges and everything. And it was just a natural thing for me to do that because I could answer the questions and help people get the right tool, So I ended up buying it from him. And the day I received it, it had 300 reamers in the collection. And I added about 115 of my own stuff right then and there. So we grew by 25% the first day I owned it. And then it was very obvious to me that the more tools I had, the more the business grew. So really, in the whole time I've owned it, most of what's been going on is just reinvesting in tools. Currently, we have between 1,800 and 1,900 reamers now. And then, of course, enough gauges to support that. So it's not unusual to have more gauges than reamers just because people sometimes rent those individually or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. God, that's a lot of reamers. That sounds like something that I'd enjoy, right? Because I just like to buy tools. Like I've been a mechanic or a, industrial mechanic or whatever my whole life. And
I think a lot of guys can relate that, tool collecting is almost a disease,
exactly.
You can't ever get it all.
My wife's always mad, why, what do you need another one of those little dial things for? You got a bunch of them. I know, but this one's nice, is good deal.
And this one does this one specific thing perfectly.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So it saves me a ton of time and money when I use it.
She doesn't understand though.
Yep, I get it. Yeah. So we just continue to add tools. About 2 years ago, my son and I started talking about him taking it over. He's been doing the back end of the business with me for years. He's always worked on the website and helped with, we redid our inventory system a couple of years ago. And that was about an 8-month project between locating the right software and implementing everything and getting the inventory current. It was a big investment for us money-wise and time-wise. And it just made him that much more of an expert in the business because while I was doing the shipping and receiving work here, he was doing the back end work in Wyoming. And so he's better versed in the computer part of it even than I am. There's a lot of times he can answer questions that I can't even figure out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it seems to make perfect sense. Right. And then I'm sure he's got a love and a passion for it too.
He does. He grew up with a gunsmith for a dad. And I suppose like most kids growing up, you don't appreciate what you have until it's out of reach.
Yeah.
It was after high school and I'd moved up here to Montana and stuff that he started going, well, I want to be a gunsmith. Yeah. I was like, well, you probably should have started learning that while you were still in the house with me.
Yeah. I've seen that happen more than once too with people I graduated from even, well, I wish you'd have wanted to take the business over 10 years ago when I wasn't retired, Yeah. No, that's cool. So I hear that EP2 grease doesn't make the greatest reamer lubricant.
Oh, you saw his post, huh? It was funny when I first saw that post. It looked like a mouthful of teeth to me because they're pumping the grease up through the bearing, you know. Basically, I think what happened was he got a reamer back from a guy that was just packed with grease and chips, you know. And we see stuff all the time that, you know, if you think you've seen it all, people are creative. They come up with different ways to do things. And the guy's response was reasonable. He said, you know, grease helps cut down on vibrations, so I didn't have any chatter that way. Well, that's okay, but there's 3 or 4 other ways to eliminate chatter that don't leave the reamer packed with grease and chips.
Yeah, like wrapping a patch around the reamer.
Yeah, patches work, wax paper.
Yeah,
you know. But what he did works. It's, you know, you use heavy axle grease and it will definitely deaden the chatter. The problem is it leaves you with a big mess both in your chamber and on the tool. So
wonder how the chamber turned out.
he claimed it came out great. So I don't think it's as good a cutting fluid, obviously, because, you know, most greases don't have sulfur and stuff like that in them. So
no, that's interesting. But yeah, so you guys rent the reamers, and real quick, while we got you on reamers, we're talking about renting reamers and what not to do with them. Is there a time that would be better to use a floating pilot over a solid pilot?
That's kind of an interesting question. You know, obviously the last 10 years or so, floating pilot reamers have become more and more and more popular. You know, when you read articles and stuff, people claim that that's the only way to do it and that's the best way to do it. If you think about it mechanically, there are advantages and disadvantages to a floating pilot. The advantage is that you can change the diameter to match your barrel pretty precisely and eliminate, you know, potential chatter, because a poorly fitting pilot is a promotion of chatter. They're directly related. So if a pilot's too loose, oftentimes that's where the chatter's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is there's tolerance stacking. So if the pilot's not fit properly to the reamer, that adds some tolerances, allows the bushing to wobble around on the pilot or on the physical pilot of the reamer.
Yep.
And then, you know, if it's not fit properly to the bore, you're adding another tolerance. So if you understand how it works, you know, a floating pilot reamer is great because it allows you to be as precise as you can. But unfortunately, a lot of hobby gunsmiths don't understand that relationship, and it actually probably isn't any better for them than a solid pilot would be, because they're stacking tolerances and don't even know it.
Yeah. What do you see you rent more of?
I would say we rent more floating pilot than solid. When we did the new inventory system, we were able to change the website around and get it to where people could pick what they want. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, you know, they still are probably 70-80% floating pilot. The solid pilot reamers rent for a little bit less money. So for the budget conscious guy, it helps a little. And the one thing we do that some people like or don't like is if you order a solid pilot reamer and the only thing we have in the drawer is floating pilot, we will upgrade your rental just to save time so that we can get it to you quicker.
Oh, sure.
And most guys understand they're getting something with a little more value. Some guys gripe and go, that's not what I ordered.
Yeah.
You know, you can't please everybody all the time. It's just the way it is.
Right. Yeah. And in my experience too, speaking of like the shipping or whatever and being quick, you guys are very fast. As long as it's in hand, it's pretty quick.
Yep. Thank you. What we do is our priority every day is shipping. So when we come in the morning, we print out all the pick lists, which is the orders, and immediately start pulling tools and getting ready to ship. So usually by 10 or 11 in the morning, the first round of shipping is pretty much done. And then at that point, we can start determining, you know, if maybe we have the tool, but it's over on the cleaning bench waiting to be cleaned. You know, so then there's a second round of shipping later in the day when we fill the back orders and pick up that stuff that just needed cleaned.
Sure. Out of all the other stuff that you rent, because I mean, like, you rent. What are the top maybe 5 other things that you guys are sending out?
Outside of the reamers and gauges.
Yep.
We sell quite a few of the Forester products. So we sell headspace gauges And the other thing that's actually sells really well is we stock the inletting guide screws and the stock maker's hand screws they've got a T handle on them and you can assemble a gun while you're stock making. And that stuff sells pretty well. We don't rent those, but I think the reason it does is because all the gunsmithing schools pretty much utilize those tools. So every semester, they tell everybody, you need to go acquire these.
Yep. Go pick these up. Sure.
Yeah. And they're inexpensive. So I think that's another reason they sell well.
Yeah. And they're handy. I mean, super handy over trying to deal with anybody who's taken a gun in and out of a stock a bunch of times, sitting there with an Allen wrench, and trying to fumble around and,
those T handles are super easy. And like when you're doing inletting, the inletting guide screws are headless. So basically once you have your floor plate inlet into the wood or whatever you're working with, then you can drop your barreled action in and it keeps it all aligned. And, so it's a lot faster because you're not running screws in and out and stuff. You just put it in, have some kind of marking material, inletting black or whatever you're using.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I don't know. I don't do a ton of inletting or anything like that, but, just the speed of it. I haven't bought a set yet, but I'm going to,
right.
So, okay. So those sell good. What else? What else is stuff? I mean, I'm just trying to let people grasp a little bit about what you guys have.
Well, there's good things and there's bad things. So like we expanded into 1911 and AR-15 tools a lot, especially during COVID when there were a lot more people staying home and working on their guns and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we were getting a lot of demand for it. And some of the suppliers were, as far as selling the stuff, didn't have it available. So we bought a bunch of stuff and put it into the rental market. What we found was AR-15 and 1911 people apparently don't understand rentals because they want to keep everything. So over time, we've kind of let that stuff go away. And the plan actually is to trim down to the stuff that we've carried for a long time that people seem to understand it's a rental. And it's funny because we mark the stuff, we've got labels on packaging and there's things on the invoice. You would think it'd be really straightforward, but the reality is nowadays none of us read anymore. You place your order, the stuff comes, you use it and you forget about it. So
right. And then like the other thing too I could see is like people that are going to be renting Reamers, they have a lathe, they've got some investment, they're probably going to come back later and want something else. And if you just don't return the Reamer, eventually I don't think we're going to rent to you anymore,
Right.
But like,
if it gets too expensive, that's, and it's funny to me too, because, I used to work for a guy years and years ago, and he said that some customers, and it's a small percentage to be very fair, there are some customers who just want to know that you're losing money. And it's always been funny to me because the fact of that is if they need your services and your business, making you lose money on a regular basis is not a smart move.
Yeah.
Because the only way any business can be there for you in the future is if they make a profit.
Right.
If you're losing, you're not going to stay in business.
I think those people are the ones that feel like if they don't get, cost or whatever, that they're not getting a good deal, and then they're the ones that are getting screwed, but
and it's interesting because in our business, we are providing we're providing a service that's both time and money savings. So the current deal in the gun industry, you go to order a Reamer someplace, if you're lucky and you catch it on the shelf, you'll get it in a week. Most of the time you have to place a special order. And this is true for us too. We don't get any better deal than Joe down the street does, so we'll order a Reamer and it could be 12 weeks or more before it comes in. We're constantly trying to fix that problem, by communicating with our suppliers and stuff. But the truth is they have limited capacity and they're working they're all pretty much backlogged. You got 4 major manufacturers, they're all backlogged. So
yeah. And doing batch work too, right? A lot of times it seems like they do, got a fresh batch of whatever 6.5 Creedmoor Reamers,
and of course they're doing their best to guess what's going to be popular. So they decided to make a run of 100 Creedmoors, and then suddenly the ARC comes online and everybody wants that instead.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guessing game for them as much as it is for anybody.
Yeah. What do you guys carry a specific brand that you care to carry more than others?
So over the years, I've bought from all of the manufacturers. We buy probably 50-60% of everything we buy now is from Pacific Tool. We just reestablished our relationship with Dave Manson. They changed hands a year or so ago, and so we've been able to negotiate a deal that works for both of us again. And it's really not about the money so much as it is the time, trying to get it set up where we get stuff in a timely manner.
Yeah, I'm working on getting actually both of those guys on.
Yep, and they're great people.
Yeah.
The guy who owns Climber, you should probably get him on too. Todd Wilms, he's a great guy. And they have Climber has a different idea about business from the others. His is almost entirely standard SAMI cartridges. He doesn't really do any Wildcat stuff. So he's more production oriented for that kind of stuff. Pacific Tool is pretty much whatever you order you can have. And that's part of the reason that they have backlog, is because, they're willing to do specials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He gets a lot of goofy stuff in too, right? Like a lot of weird, like all of a sudden he'll just have a bunch of weird, like Remington 700 actions that he got from like Remington that they found in a warehouse somewhere or something, like he's a funny guy.
Well, of course, that's another way to make money. You got a bunch of employees out in the shop. You got to keep them busy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, he was a machinist for Alice Chalmers way back. So me and him got to talking about that. I work at a power plant during the day that was built by Alice Chalmers. So I was interested if he maybe had a hand in some of the stuff, but I think he was more on the implement side.
Right.
So one last question on the Reamers. What would you say as the top, like, let's just give it two calibers that you see go out?
The twos right now, the hottest stuff is probably the PRCs. The 7mm just became pretty available. And that's been flying off the shelf. 300 and 6.5 PRC are both real hot. And I think it's just that particular shooting game, the precision rifle series, has become super popular. I mean, there's matches all over the country. Lots and lots of people, even if they're not shooting competitively, they're interested in that type of shooting and using that as a training method.
Right. They're watching the people that are doing well and they want to.
Right.
What those guys are.
It's funny too. I used to tell a gunsmith that I was friends with about the reason certain things are popular is because of what's being written about or talked about in various media. And he kind of hemmed and hawed. And I said, well, here's the thing that you need to think about. If the top 10 shooters in the country are all shooting 6.5 Creedmoor, everybody who reads about that sport or pays attention to what's going on with it thinks that they can only win if they have a 6.5 Creedmoor. So it makes it very popular.
Yep.
The truth is, those top 10 guys, you could hand them any cartridge and they could apply their loading techniques and everything to their guns, and they'd still be the top 10 shooters.
Right.
And that was the part he'd argue with me over. He'd say, no, some cartridges are better than others. I'm like, really, it's all about attention to detail, loading, good quality gun, good barrel, all of the things that go into the package.
Yeah. I look at that when I explain it to people who want like a real accurate gun for whatever it is, I kind of, if you're in NASCAR and you can gain, an extra 2 laps on this other set of tires, it might be worth it to spend the money, because if you win in that NASCAR race, that's a big deal. Right. So like if this guy goes and shoots a 6mm and he gains 1 extra hit because it was a 6mm, that's probably worth it to him.
Right.
But for you, who's going to shoot maybe 1 or 2 matches a year just for fun, like, don't go out and buy something that's hard to find ammo for, expensive to load, going to burn barrels up, because you're going to lose in the long run. Like 1 or 2 hits, that ain't going to matter to you. You're going to go out and have a good time. You're not going to win. I mean, if you get to the point where you're doing that good, by all means, step up. But like even, for me, I'm not out there winning matches left and right, so it's like, well, yeah, could I maybe do a little better with something else? Maybe, but is 2 hits in a day gonna be worth what I have to pay to?
Is it going to move you up in the stats, right?
Yeah, is it juice worth the squeeze? And it just
Right.
isn't a lot of times, as long as you can get that bullet to go as fast as you want or whatever it is. That seems to be the ticket as far as what I see. But
Well, and I'm a firm believer, taking off on your thought there, is if you're wanting to be competitive, if you stay with the same type of equipment long enough to really learn it and get good at loading that cartridge and all of those things, you will improve dramatically over time. If you keep jumping equipment and switching gears to different cartridges and stuff, your learning path is much more jagged. You're not on a smooth path when you do that.
yeah, what I say, beware of the man with one gun, because he probably knows how to use it.
Absolutely. Definitely in the hunting world. I mean, I've been in camp with old guys that they've got a gun that just looked like hell and they've been hunting
Mhm.
their whole life. And invariably they're the guy who, not only gets on the game, but actually puts it down.
Yep. And the funny thing about that too is, like, a lot of times, like, the stuff that they do or say when you talk to those old guys, like, it doesn't make sense sometimes. Like, they're telling you about how this thing works and it doesn't make sense, but they know how to do it with their gun,
Great.
right? Like, whatever it is they do, it works for them. They've done it 100 times. They got it totally figured out. And then, so they're trying to explain to you, and it's like, well, he's been using that rifle for 52 years and he just knows what it's going to do. So it's like funny to hear the explanations sometimes when they,
Right. My favorite old timer advice for a hunter is always aim at hair. So
yeah,
never hold over the back, never lead in front of the shoulder, always aim at hair.
sure. Yeah. If I got to lead, if I got to lead anything, I don't know if I'm shooting.
Right.
It'd have to be a pretty slow.
Not so bad with birds, but it's a lot different with
Yeah.
big game.
Birds don't have hair.
Fair. You got me there.
So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the books. This is something I'm pretty excited about because
Okay.
I like, for one, I like your books. The couple that I have read, I really enjoyed them. It's my style. I pick up on it. It's easy read. It's stuff that I'm interested in. The other thing, kind of what we talked about, you're bringing some of that old stuff back into publication. And I really like that as well, because, like, a lot of the stuff that's being learned right now, I feel like has been done before, and we're all just kind of going through a lot of it again. And so to see you bring in some of this, because I wish I had a camera. This bookshelf behind me here, this is all full of books I got bluing manuals from the 20s, and I got
Sure.
barrel straightening manual from like the 10s or something, like how to build a
Right.
press and straighten your barrel back out, and like weird stuff like that. And I just find that super cool and interesting. And some of the stuff that we talked about really got me excited, and I'd like to hear kind of your take on it.
Well, the way it got started was I was teaching a class on Wildcat cartridges for like the NRA gunsmithing schools. And I came home from teaching this class for the second or third time. And I went, I've got this outline where I teach this class. I basically have a book written, I said naively.
Yeah.
And 18 months later, I had it finished. But that was the first one. That was a Wildcat cartridge book, and I just agreed to do a second edition of that with Gun Digest. So that'll come out probably in about a year. But that book, basically what I did was I looked at when's the last time somebody did something about Wildcat cartridges and what was in it. Well, it was pretty much P.O. Ackley. There's some anthologies where they've put together collections of articles and stuff that are about Wildcats, and those are great. But what I had in mind was to kind of duplicate what Ackley did without copying his material. So took a snapshot of the industry at the time, put a little bit of history in as well to explain that this is how we got to this point. And the thing I added that wasn't in Ackley's stuff was I did a section on making your own reloading dies, making your own reamers, and explaining everything about what it takes to design a cartridge and put together the whole process. And so that made it kind of unique. And the second edition is really just going to be an update of that. So going to add a couple of chapters on some how to handle 22 ammunition not being available. So it'll contain several things on how to substitute or reload or whatever for 22 long rifle and even 22 mag. And then The other things will be like, improving the captions under the pictures so that they're more explanatory. Fixing all the errors, because there were certainly a few in the first book.
Yeah.
And just there's 2 or 3 other chapters they want me to add, and I think they'll all be valuable. So I'm excited about that one because that's the project I'm working on.
Yeah. So hitting on the Wildcat stuff right now, real quick. Did you see that brass that Snowy Mountain Rifles is coming out with?
I don't know. Is it Alpha Brass or is it something
No,
else?
it's their own deal. I'm lining up a show with them about it. Marcus Hom went to SHOT Show and he did some interviews for us. And this is one of the interviews. And then we're going to have them on and expand on that. So they've got some way to CNC machine brass.
Okay.
And it's not cheap, right? But it's
Right.
compared to like a regular extruded brass. But like kind of what me and Marcus were talking about, which I don't want to get too far into this because it's going to be a whole show a little later on the road. But
Sure.
man, if you're doing some wildcatting or obsolete cartridges or whatever, like the biggest advantage that I saw to this was you can call them up and tell them, I want, whatever, 338, whatever it is that you've decided, and they'll just crank it out on the lathe, that small batch, 100 pieces. And
Sure.
then they can just punch in a different program and switch up and cut 308 and switch up, so that's going to be like a game changer for a lot of this wildcatting.
Yeah. And I think that's truly one of the chapters that is going to be is about supplies and where you can get stuff and whatever. There's been huge changes in the last, I wrote that book back in like 2004. There's been so many changes in the industry. There's numerous suppliers now that offer like blank brass that you can size to whatever it is you're doing. You mentioned this one. There's Alpha Munitions came out with a line of brass that supposedly can handle more pressure and stuff, which obviously a wildcatter is going to think is a cool thing.
Right.
Pacific Tool and Gauge, Quality Cartridge. They have added machinery and stuff, and so they offer head stamp brass in almost anything you can think of. And if you're willing to pay for some tooling, they'll build anything you want. So it's cool that there's stuff available now that wasn't available in the past.
Yeah, it's in the industry. It's all traveling so fast too.
Oh yeah, it's getting hard to keep up. I mean, when I first got into gunsmithing, the number of suppliers that were out there was pretty limited. So it was pretty easy to keep track of who's bringing on the new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now you go to SHOT Show, or if you're just trying to read the magazines and keep up, it is amazing how much stuff's coming online every year.
Right. And it's like the more there is, it's like,
yeah. And of course it's a feeding frenzy for guys who are into it like us,
Yep.
You're like, oh, that's cool. I want to look at that. And oh, look, this kind of brass is available now. I could do this project. And,
right.
I ran onto a company last year that the only thing they're doing is they're making 5.7 by 28 brass, but it's just brass. It's not the coated stuff like the Europeans are making and whatever. So
Sure.
For somebody who wants to play with that cartridge and wildcat it, it's a much better choice. But it's funny that it's gotten to the point where people can do niches like this and make good livings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you seen those people taking, we're getting kind of out of the realm here, but
That's all right.
They're taking like old rimfire carts, 41 rimfire, and they're turning brass as a straight wall or whatever. So it's probably a little easier, or whatever, but they're building little brass, and then they build a pocket in the back, and they put in like a concrete anchor, like a concrete gun. Those
okay. Yeah, the blanks.
The blanks. It's like a 22 blank for driving concrete nails or whatever, concrete anchors.
Right.
And that's what they put in there, and they just line it up in the gun when they put it in there, and that's what they're using to shoot these old obsolete rimfires.
Well, it's a great way to get something back out there shooting that, and they're single shots anyway, most of them. So,
I think it's kind of cool. It's just neat to see. I can't imagine there's a lot of power behind it or whatever, but at least you're out shooting it. Where in the past you'd buy it and it would just sit because what are you going to do?
Right. Well, and a lot of those cartridges, the original cartridge wasn't real fast either. So
that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but on the subject of the books, I mean, the other thing I've done is I started looking at the gunsmithing books that were out there, and they were all very antiquated, very dated. And that doesn't mean that the material's not good. It just means that it doesn't cover current technology a lot of times. and it doesn't address the improvements that we've made. And, there's been, I think everybody would agree, there's been huge improvements in accuracy stuff for rifles and chambering, and barrel quality is improved with all the makers. People will ask me, who's the best barrel maker? Who should I buy my barrel from? And my answer is, if you're shooting bench rest and stuff, there's 2 or 3 makers that everybody tends to go to, and you'll be happy with any of them. If you're a hunting guy, buy from any maker that strikes your fancy, that offers the caliber you want, because they're all making good barrels. Do some of them occasionally make a bad barrel? Every single company occasionally makes a bad barrel. So you don't hang the company because, or you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater because of one bad one, right?
Especially, it's not like they're making 3 barrels a year, I mean.
Right. Yeah. And so I encourage people to go with what they're interested in and what they like, because all the makers are making good stuff,
Yeah. And that's the quality of the tooling and stuff. Everything's getting so much more accurate, I mean.
Right.
So
anyway, that's what led to the series of books on gunsmithing, was the fact that there's all this improved technology, but no improved books on how to do.
Yeah. So the most recent one that I read was chambering rifles for accuracy.
Oh yeah, that's I did that one with Gordy Gritters. I got one here. I'll hold up for a sec, I guess. But and I've got my screen reversed, don't I?
Oh, it's reading straight.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, Gordy Gritters, if any of you guys know, he's a gunsmith who does bench rest quality guns, and he's a real popular guy. He does classes on how to do chambering and that sort of thing. He'll either do them, personal one-on-one classes, or people will go in groups and fly down to his place and for 5 days or whatever, they're there in his shop taking classes. I've never heard anybody who has taken a class from him say they were unhappy. Every single person comes away going, man, I learned so much. And generally speaking, if you don't get to build a gun while you're in the class, most guys run right home and they've already got a lathe and stuff that they've been dying to learn how to use.
Yeah.
And they'll get busy and build that first gun. And invariably they're like, I just did everything he taught me in the class, and now I've got this thing that shoots bug holes, And, so great guy. And I've known him for years, just through the rental business and through connections at SHOT Show, friends that, you just connect with people sometimes. It's a small industry.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, I'm going to do a book on chambering. And I said, I'm really good with hunting rifles and wildcatting and fun stuff like that. But when it comes to bench rest, it's kind of a different game. And I'd rather have somebody who's an expert and recognized in that write that part of the book. How do you feel about it? And he said, I think that'd be a lot of fun. So we started sending stuff back and forth to each other so he could see what I was doing and I could see what he was doing. And we made a point of, it's not that we avoided talking about what the other guy was doing, because we didn't, but we made a point of, the 2 sections of the book are very clearly different. My part is for hunting rifles and for guys who are maybe on a budget and can't afford to pull out every stop on every gun. And the methodology that I show is for minute of angle guns. They're going to shoot a minute of angle or less, and it depends a little bit on your setup and your experience and your practice. But there's no reason why you can't have stuff that's shooting under a minute doing the methods that I teach, and it's fast and profitable. So if you're a guy trying to make a living as a gunsmith, or if you're a hobbyist and you have limited time, these methods work great and they're economical. Then you go to Gordy's side of things, where you pull out every stop, you measure everything 6 times, you double check everything a couple times before you actually do anything, measure twice, cut once, all of the things that go into precision. And, he measures stuff that I would probably never have thought to measure. And when I see what he's doing, I go, it makes complete sense. I understand exactly why you're doing it.
Yep.
But what I advise gunsmithing students when we talk about this is, if you're going to do bench rest quality work, you should charge for it, because some guys are afraid they're going to lose the job if they charge more. So I always tell them, there's no reason to leave that money on the table. If you're doing good quality work and you're earning your keep, charge for the work, because for one thing, the customers need to know there's value there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the only thing that speaks for you at the range is the gun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. If it's a $200 chamber or $1,000 chamber, if it doesn't shoot, it doesn't shoot. If it shoots
Right.
lights out, it does. So.
Right. And that's the interesting thing too, is, when I talk about the two different methodologies, some people are like, well, I want all of my alibis removed. I want it to be a bench rest quality gun. Well, that's not cost effective for everybody. Not everybody can afford that. So that's the reason for the difference.
Yeah. And then, I wonder too, like, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about it, I guess. Having a real tight chamber for hunting, right? Next thing you know, you drop a shell on the ground and you got a deer in front of you or whatever, you might want to have just that extra thousandth or whatever kind of in there.
Right. So tight chambers work great when you're sitting at a bench, where if you're doing bench rest or some kind of competition thing where you've got plenty of time to deal with things that don't go right, that's not a problem. When you're out hunting, and there's actually two things to hit on this. Out hunting, like you said, drop a piece of ammo or something and now it won't go in your chamber. That's a problem. And then you've gotten your chamber dirty, so now none of your ammo will fit. And the other thing is, if you're talking about a self-defense gun or a gun that you might need to use in some end day scenario or whatever, having it be too precision is probably not to your benefit, because how do you know what ammo is going to be available? Is it going to be, good quality stuff, or are you going to have to make use of whatever you can find?
Right.
So for most situations, it doesn't make sense to have a small diameter chamber. It just doesn't work in your favor as far as reliability goes.
Right. I mean, I've seen it chambers before where they're real tight, and even just shooting different boxed ammo. You grab the Federal and it fits, and you grab the Remington and it fits, but it fits tight. And
right.
And you don't see that with a production rifle. Generally stuff just kind of fits and shoots.
Right. And it's interesting you're touching on that. That's tolerances when it comes to headspace and the brass versus the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think of ammo being a direct, exact mirror of the chamber, and that's not really true. Factory ammunition is considerably smaller than the chamber, and in some cases a lot smaller. And then the brass is the system that allows that to work. As you fire it, the brass swells up and matches your chamber and keeps everything in place. And so the understanding of the difference between brass and chamber has a huge effect on reliability and accuracy and all kinds of things. And so that's one of the things that gets covered in these books too, is explaining how those tolerances work and what's beneficial and what's not.
Sure. One more quick question about chambers, and then we'll move on to some of the other books.
Okay.
How do you feel about polishing up chambers?
I'm mostly opposed to it. Your chamber reamer should be in good enough condition that you shouldn't have to polish it. It's not unusual to have a situation where a chip gets stuck or something, and maybe there's a little bit of a mark in the chamber, but it shouldn't be like a groove. And if you do have to polish it, about 400 grit paper is about as fine as you should ever use. You can put it on a mandrel and give it a quick polish. You want to make sure that you don't dwell on one side or get stuck up in the throat and the neck and stuff, because you're going to round off things that need to be sharp and crisp. But at 400 grit, that gives you a polish that looks really nice, but it allows your brass to adhere to the chamber during firing and extract properly as it cools. So if you go too fine, the brass can't adhere to the chamber properly. So if you went to say 600 grit or higher, you're setting up a situation where you're actually increasing bolt thrust because the brass can't adhere to the chamber during firing. So that's the reason for kind of a mid-range polish.
Yeah, because you hear people like, oh, flits, get some flits and mirror finish that baby, but
right. And the funny thing is, flits doesn't really remove very much material, because you can use flits on a blued gun, and unless you act stupidly, it won't even take the bluing off. So yeah, it gives it a polish and stuff, but it's not removing very much at all.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of what's it called? They sell it at Harbor Freight. It's a rust removal. deal. It works really, really good on like old rusty barn equipment and stuff that I've fixed up or whatever. Got a Evaporust. It's called Evaporust.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with it. Everybody I've ever talked to likes it.
Don't
It's a
put
good
blued
product.
guns in there.
Well, if you put Evaporust, if you put a gun in Evaporust, if it's blued, it will not be blued afterwards.
Yeah, it will not be.
Well, bluing is just an oxide, so it's really rust. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I had a Remington 700 of the neighbors, and it was in a flood. The house flooded, and so everything was, the whole trigger group assembly was all rusty, and most of it was plastic, except for the little lip that goes up when you put the shells in. Can't think what it's called.
Follower?
No, just the little tab that hangs out below the receiver that you push it up when you put the shells in. The name is just totally, I can't think of it.
And I don't know why I'm not picking up, but
yeah. If I you know what? I'm gonna grab one real quick because it's gonna bother me.
Okay. All else fails, show and tell. Oh, follower.
Yeah, that there. And
follower or liftgate or
liftgate, yeah. So it was all rusty on the inside there, so I thought I'm just gonna stick it in that Evaporust and just see what happens. It should work pretty good. And I pulled it out, and of course the end of that was sticking out about 3/4 of an inch. It ate all the bluing off of that, and then it's just perfect on the top there. There's a little blue. I mean, it was all rusty anyway because it was all flooded, so it didn't hurt nothing. But
so before everybody laughs at me, it's a carrier.
Yeah.
Or I guess after everybody laughs at me.
Yeah. Well, like me, I was trying to come up with it and I just couldn't. And then, for me, like I have a hard time. If you're having a hard time, then I start having a hard time too. It's like,
yeah, it's this whole senior thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't have that excuse. I'm just not yet. But yeah, I learned that was that, and that Croyle will eat the camo off a gun.
Right.
I learned that.
The other thing that people don't realize is WD-40. I know everybody knows it's not much of an oil, but it's also a rust preventative. So if you leave a lot of WD-40 on a blued gun, oftentimes it will start to strip the bluing.
It lightens it up for sure. Yeah. My uncle used to do that in his case for this 870 for deer hunting. And where the case was, it held onto the WD-40, and he laid that. It was in there for so long, the outline of the gun was in the foam. Those plastic hard shell cases with the egg curtain foam. When you'd pull it out of there, you could see where every one of those dots was on the gun, where every one of those tops of that egg carton foam was pushing down because it would soak that bluing out, and it was just like spots down the whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
So, all right, back to the books quick. We got a little bit of time here. We'll hit on some of the books. I know you're bringing some books back into you're republishing them. Let's hit on that and talk about some of that, because that's kind of what I was bringing up before about the, a lot of this stuff that we're trying now has been done, and so let's just hit on that a little bit.
Yeah, the most recent one, I tracked down Stuart Otteson, who in the 70s and 80s, he wrote 2 books. He wrote one called The Bolt Action and Analysis, a Design Analysis, and then he did a second volume about 6 or 8 years later, which covered different guns. So that was volume 2 of the same thing. And the first one I've got done. And so basically, it's all the original artwork and everything. He gave me the rights to reprint it. And so the cool thing about that was he had all the original artwork, and it was all pen drawn on graph paper, old school drafting.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So when it came to me, the first thing was when I opened the package and looked at it, I was like, holy crap, this is cool. And then the second thing was, now I got to figure out how to scan this stuff and get it back into the book. So I played around with software till I found something that worked really well. And so when I scanned this stuff, I was able to get it take the graph paper out, eliminate all the dust and smudges and everything.
Sure.
So the illustrations in this book are clean and crisp, and I made them as big as I could without sacrificing the text and the spacing and everything.
Sure.
So they're more legible even than the original prints, which I think is great. Funny, after I sent Stuart a copy of this first book, he goes, I don't like that you changed the size of those. And, he's in his 80s now. So I'm like, Okay, so we're having grumpy old guy syndrome, you know, and I kind of teased him about it. He's a super nice guy. And anyway, he's proud of the book as it stands now. He likes the new cover. And he was very specific about some of the things. You know, he gave me the rights to do it whatever way I wanted, but I'm trying to be respectful. And I go back to him and say,
Yeah.
hey, Stuart, we're doing the new cover. Here's some samples. What do you think? And he had opinions. There was no doubt what he liked and didn't like. So then that makes it fun for me.
I was going to say, I can appreciate that though. Like, it's no wishy-washiness, you know, it's, you're not guessing, you're not hoping, you know, you show him and he's like, I don't like it. And you're like, all right.
Right. Right. And the goal is to bring back a book that he's proud of.
Yeah.
You know, these books haven't been printed in like 40 years. And so they become collectible, which is part of the reason I hunted him down. I'm like, you know, these books are selling for volume 1. It's not unusual to see for 75 to $100 on the different sites. Volume 2 was never printed in great quantities. And I'm starting to see it at like $300 a copy. And that's the one I'm working on now. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to put them in the market at a reasonable print price where booksellers can afford to stock them and sell them.
Sure. What didn't he like? Why didn't he like the pictures being bigger?
He didn't like the fact that it did cause us to move some of the text on some of the pages a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't change the page count or anything. But he just didn't like the changes. He had it in his mind. It was put together the way it should be. So, and I pointed out to him, I said, well, the bigger images are easier. They're more legible. And he goes, yeah, I know, but
yeah,
just didn't like it, I guess. So,
sure.
But I'm proud of it. I think it turned out great. And like I say, I'm working on the second volume right now. And it's the big difference, of course, is it's just different actions. This book was like the Winchester 70, the 98 Mauser, I think Weatherby's in there. There's a bunch of good ones in here. Remington 700's in here. And then the later one has a couple of oddballs, but it has some really cool bench rest type actions and high quality specialty actions that were popular in the 80s.
Oh, sure.
So it's an interesting book too. And what it does is because he was a design engineer, he collected the information like the spring diameter, the wire diameter, the count, you know, how much thrust, everything is laid out in charts for you. So if you were wanting to design an action, you could really go to this and use it as a design template for whatever you wanted to do.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of custom actions out there now. And I think a lot of people have probably kind of leaned on this book because it provides real world data.
Sure. That was going to be my next question was what do I learn when I buy this book?
Well, those things obviously, but he has a little bit of history in there where he talked to the engineers who actually designed them. He went to and looked at the patent drawings and the patent information to put information in. And then the thing that I think is probably the smartest is he looked for production guns to do his measurements and stuff from, because he knew that just because you design something a certain way doesn't mean it translated to production that way. So clearly from talking to him and from some of the comments in the book, in many cases, he laid his hands on several different actions to try and see how things changed over time. There's places in it where he talks about the early version of this gun was this way and the later one was different. And so it's very thorough, scholarly, I guess you could say, as far as, you know, digging into these actions.
Oh man, that is up on the list of stuff that I'm going to have to get now.
Right. Well, I'm going to send you one. You need to review it for your website. I
would be honored. That would be great. I would love to. That's right up my alley.
Cool.
Yep. Like I said, I got, you can see from here, but I got, you know, I mean, I know you can't see, but that's something. I got a big collection of old books from.
My thing is I try to collect signed books now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would be, I'm not that far into it, but I do have a good start. I think I've got the Shooter's Digest. Shooter's Digest was a big thick magazine book thing, right?
Yeah, there's Shooter's Bible, Gun Digest.
The Gun Digest. I've got probably 35 or 40 years of those I picked up
Cool.
from a guy. Just, I don't know. It's just cool stuff to me. I don't know.
Oh, you got to pick up the 2023 edition. There's a gun in there that I built.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll have
Yeah.
to get it and add it.
Yeah, that's the most recent one, and so it's on sale now. But it has we built a gun, myself and another guy, as a tribute to Bob Dunlap, was the guy that taught me gunsmithing, and he passed away about 3 years ago. And we got this gun out of his collection, and it's a 1911. And Bob was the kind of guy that he didn't like bells and whistles on a 1911. He liked them very plain Jane.
Sure.
So we were talking about it and going, how do you take a gun that he would have wanted to be plain Jane and make it interesting enough? Because it's a charity thing. We want to raise money.
Sure.
You know, and so we ended up, I melted the entire gun, bobbed the back end of it off, custom grips, and had it Cerakoted with a custom finish so it looks battle worn.
Oh, sure.
And did a bunch of like 70s and 80s custom features, like machine features, where you lower the port and flute it, and open up the magwell and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. And the idea was it becomes a carry gun that's very smooth and slick, doesn't catch on your clothes or whatever. And that's the kind of thing that Bob would have appreciated. And we managed to make that look attractive and fun. And
that's
the
awesome.
other guy that worked on it did all the reliability work. And so it locks up like a vault and it shoots great. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to pick that up. I got, like I said, I picked up that collection from that guy, and I'm going to try and get it to where he stopped and keep going with it.
Right.
So, all right, cool. Is there anything you want to throw out there? Anything that we didn't get a chance to hit on?
No, I think we did great. I'd love to come back and talk to you about other things on another date.
Yeah. We'll do another show once I don't know. We'll be in touch, but maybe when there's a couple more books available or something. I know you're working on more of the gunsmithing series, because we only hit on one of those. There's 3 of those available, correct? Headspace.
There's a total of 4. We have Headspace for Ackley cartridges. Mm-hmm. We have Understanding Headspace, which is what everybody really should know if they're going to chamber. The chambering book that you mentioned, and I have one that we call a primer, and it's basically about gunsmithing tools, how they're designed and why they work. So it doesn't really teach gunsmithing per se, but it helps the novice and frankly some intermediate gunsmiths who should know this stuff learn about how these tools work and how to use them properly so you don't damage them. And it was written by the 4 big gun tool makers and me. So basically I edited it all together to try and cover as much ground as I could. And the idea is it answers all those questions that we all get every day. So, if you were calling PTG, or if you're calling Forrester or Clymer or Manson or whoever, there's like 90 questions that everybody asks.
Yeah.
So the idea behind this book is to answer all of those and a few more.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, any of those books, right? Almost anybody who reads a book like that's going to pick something up, right? I mean,
absolutely. And it's funny because I get 2 reactions. I get the guys who are insulted because I provide it for free to people sometimes when they have questions. It's just a great way to answer questions for them. I give them an ebook. And I'll get people who are super excited. They're like, that's a great book. Thanks for sending that to me. And then I get I don't need that.
I've been doing this for 40 years, and the last thing I need is you telling me how to do it.
And of course, my thought is, and you stopped learning on day 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, cool. Well, when it comes to more book information, we'll get another show scheduled up here, and we'll give it a while, like I said, till the books are out, or a couple more, or whatever.
Sure.
And then we'll have you back on and talk about them. So if we hit on all that, this is your last call. Anything? Nothing. Good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Where can anybody find you? Where's the best place to buy the books? Where's the best place to 4dreamers.com?
So 4drentals.com is the website. And basically almost all of our orders come through the website. So it's super easy to work with. The whole website is a shopping cart. Mm-hmm. The books are on there. You just find them under the store portion. It says books and DVDs. And all of the books are available on Amazon as well. So
boom, 2 really easy places. Cool. Yeah. Anybody's got questions or comments or anything? Go buy a book. Is that?
And one advantage, if you buy them from 4D, I sign all the books that come out of 4D.
Oh,
a little freebie that goes with them.
Yeah. That is good to know. I'm kind of like that where when I buy new books, if I like to get them signed too. The last one I bought, you're probably gonna laugh. It was a book by a guy. He owns Marksmanship Training Center out in Michigan there,
Okay.
and he wrote my name wrong. I was like, whatever, close enough.
Yeah.
So cool. So that's 4drentals.com. And then if they got questions, comments, or concerns,
send us an email. We'll be glad to answer questions. It's not a problem.
boom, there you have it. Well, I really appreciate it.
We're really customer service oriented, and sometimes people, I guess, are afraid to ask. So don't hesitate.
Yeah, there's I got to get a hold of them too. I got to pay my tab. So with that, man, I really appreciate you taking time to come on. I really do. It was a great show. I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of it. I'm really excited to get the books, and that's right up my alley. That is, like I said, that's just super interesting to me. And as soon as I get it read, I'll do a review. I'll let you know, and we'll go from there.
I enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And you take care. So with that, everybody, man, that was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. Super guy that's been around for a long time knows, you're not going to pull the wool over him when it comes to building stuff and making cool things. Anybody who's got questions, comments, or concerns about anything, get a hold of me, Kirk at precisionriflemedia.com. Go to precisionriflemedia.com, click on the contact us section. That'll shoot me an email as well. The Facebook's good. That's just precisionriflemedia.com. Go there, Precision Rifle Media on Facebook. Go there, shoot me a message. That's pretty quick and easy. There's a couple other guys there helping out. So with that, everybody, take care. Try to get to the range, and I'll talk to y'all next week. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.